All right, welcome to our Linux Essentials cohort. This is for our D281 course. Let's go ahead and get started. Question number 1 is coming up. All these questions are designed to mimic the actual LPI exam. The first question is going to be a multi-select. It says the following distributions are considered enterprise grade and to choose 3. So as a reminder, your LPI exam, when you take it, is going to be 40 questions. 7 of those 40 questions will be like this, where you will need to choose 2 answers, 3 answers, however many it tells you. 30 will be standard, choose the best answer. You're just going to choose just one answer for it. And the other 3 we'll talk about later in the session. The answer to this that we're looking for is Red Hat Enterprise. It's a real giveaway. It's called Red Hat Enterprise, so pretty obvious that's going to be an enterprise grade. CentOS, always considered enterprise. What about Ubuntu? Well, normally it would not be. However, it's those 3 letters that you see at the end of it. Those are long-term support. That ensures that it's going to be supported for some time. It's going to have your maybe some additional hardware drivers made available, security patches, and the such. All right, you get points for getting the question answered correctly and more points for getting it ahead of other people. Leaderboard is populated. Let's go. Question 2, another multi-select. This time I'm going to ask you to choose the 3 components that make up a Linux distribution. Now, we do have a timer on this, which is going to make it seem rushed for you. But when you take the actual exam, no, you will have all the time in the world. I've never heard anyone complain about time. When you take it, you will have time to get to the end, take a breath, catch your breath, relax, go back and look at all of your questions. Even if you're one of the people who say, I don't do that because I'm not going to change my answers, you need to make sure every question that said choose 3 answers, that there are 1, 2, 3 selected. Maybe it dropped one. Maybe you missed the button. There is no partial credit given on these questions. You either get it completely right or completely wrong, so double check. The Linux distribution includes the kernel. This is the behind-the-scenes operation that makes everything work. It sets up the file management system. It makes the drivers work with the hardware, everything to make the operating system go. However, you can't really interact with that very much. You need some sort of a shell. Now that will likely be a GUI or graphical user interface, or maybe a terminal such as the bash terminal that we're going to be using throughout this session. And then lastly, the distribution needs to have programs. Programs can be everything from utilities to add a user to check email, browse the web. So you need the 3 of those for a Linux distribution. Oh, wow, look there, brand new leaderboard. All right, question number 3, just a single select. It says, use this command to create a new empty file. It comes out of the domain 3 of the LPI guide. Your exam is actually based on 5 competencies, topics, subjects, chapters, whatever you want to call it. And when possible, I'll kind of tell you where these questions fall on that. Touch is the command we're looking for on this. So just simply type touch space and the name of the file, and boom, you've got a brand new file, empty, created with the default directory permissions. Number 4. Here's another multi-select. I love the multi-selects, right? How about giving me 3 important facts regarding the Linux kernel? Sound like there was going to be more to that, but that's it. Just 3 important facts about the Linux kernel. I'd like to give you a little bit of extra information on this as we go along. By the way, if you select the purple one on this, you're getting kicked out of the game. First thing that I always like to point out is that the kernel does indeed allocate system resources to the processes. Kind of talked about that earlier. It's going to uh, allocate how much RAM's in use, how much CPU is going to be used for the different processes. It also treats everything as a file. So even if you're looking at a piece of hardware, you might find this in a directory type format. And then lastly, keep in mind that the kernel is located in /boot. Always like to point out at this time, people will frequently assume that it is stored in /root. /root is a home directory for our super user named root. Remember, all other users have their home directory in /home something, but not our super user. It's going to be in /root. How about a true or false question? You don't have any true or false questions on your actual exam. We can put them in here. This one says, inside the proc directory, you will find a separate directory for each instance of a running process. It's going to give us an opportunity to look at the LPI guide. I think it's very important that you familiarize yourself with this. Now, you may be used to the 15-chapter textbook that's typically referenced with this, and that's an excellent textbook. I always tell students it's a little bit better maybe for learning Linux. Whereas this official study guide published by LPI, the same people who wrote the exam, is a little bit better for passing the LPI exam. It's what I teach from. You can do whatever you choose. I mentioned that your exam is made up of 5 domains topics. The LPI guide is designed to match that exactly. So each topic has a main topic number. So topic 4, for instance, is the Linux operating system. And each topic has subtopics. Here we have domain topic, 4.3, where data is stored. Every subtopic has this title page, and it's really great. It's full of so much information. First off, we see the weight of 3. That tells us there are 3 questions on the exam directly from this topic. 3 out of how many? 40. Only 40 on the exam. But I go down to the bottom of this page and I see this part that says partial list of the used files, terms, and utilities. This is really essential that you look at these and you know about each one of these items. A good half of your exam is going to be based on these. So know, what is PS? What is top? What does it look like? What are any special properties, parameters for free? What's in the Etsy directory? Where might, what special processes or maybe properties might we see on the /proc directory? So know those things inside and out. For this one in particular, we are talking about the proc directory. When we review this in our guide, we will learn every time we open an instance of a process, say nano, we're going to have a new directory inside of proc. So /proc/ whatever it's going to be called, and that's going to manage what's happening for that instance of nano. If we open a second instance of nano, we will get another separate directory. Therefore, the answer to this question is true. Number 6, while top shows processes running dynamically, this command provides an instantaneous snapshot of the same. I'm going to open up my Bash terminal so that we can take a look at this. The question starts off and mentions top. So I'm going to start off with top. Top does indeed look a bit like Task Manager. Here we have all kinds of information to show what CPU usage we have, how our RAM's being used. Then gives a breakdown of the processes. This is our PID, that's process ID, the user that's running it. Here's our percent CPU, our memory, the time that it's been running, the actual command. So here's a side question for you to answer in the chat bar. What one key can I press to get out of this program, as well as many programs that are running in the terminal? Q, and just for the record, I don't give answer. I don't give a correct for Q question mark. You have to be positive about it. You have to say Q, but I also don't give it for capital Q, just so you know. It's a lowercase q. Lowercase q is the answer to that, something you should definitely know. So that's our dynamic view of what's happening, but I can use the PS command, such as ps-aux as an example of some of the parameters, and I can get the instantaneous snapshot of how our processes are running. There's another command that's ps-tree that will give you a tree version of that. Question number 7, this comes out of domain 5. I frequently tell students domain 5 is sort of the bane of my existence with this exam. Nearly every student who does not pass the exam will take domain 5. So many times I've asked, well, why, what happened? And students will say, well, I knew about the chmod command, so I figured I knew what was going on. Great. Chmod, at most, there are going to be 8 questions on domain 5 on your exam. At most, only one of those 8 questions is chmod related. We all understand chmod, super, you should know it, but there is so much more to know about domain 5, such as etsyscale, which is a template directory for new users. We're going to cover a lot of domain 5 on this. Important to note, domain 5, not the most technically challenging portion of the exam. That would definitely belong to domain 3. People just stop when they get to domain 5. They don't give it the attention that it deserves. Here's a domain 2 question. This is about dot notation. You're going to have 3 questions on your exam about navigating the Linux directory structure. So this asks the question, you are in the directory home Jimbo downloads and you issue the command cd ... where will you find yourself? So let's go back to my terminal and let's take a look. The very first thing that we need to keep in mind when we are navigating our directory structures, we need to know where we're at. And we can do that with the pwd command. Pwd is always going to tell us the present working directory, where we are at. Now, I'm going to update my prompt to show me in real time where I'm at. You don't need to know how to do this. It's just so you can see and I don't have to keep typing in pwd. So if I am in home Jimbo downloads, that's where I'm at. The question is, where am I going to end up if I do cd ... And what that will do is that's going to take me back 2 levels. It's going to bring me back to the home directory. So let me go back just where I was, home Jimbo downloads. And I always like to throw this in. Where is cd dot going to take me? Dot is not going to take me anywhere. Dot is referencing the current directory. Always references the current directory. So let's build on this. How about cd ... It's going to bring me back 1 level. How about if I want to get back to downloads? You are probably most accustomed to just doing cd downloads, and that will work. But here's what I want to show you. I'm going to go back to Jimbo. I can also do cd ... downloads. Now, why did I point that out to you? Because it is important for you to understand cd ... downloads is a completely different directory than cd ... downloads. When I say a single dot, that means start where you are. You are in this directory and you're building upon it. You're moving forward to downloads. But when I have 2 dots, that means back it up a directory and then move. So one is just moving forward, one's moving you back and then forward. A couple of the other ones you should know. cd/ will bring you to the root directory, and cd tilde will bring you to your home directory. Now, last point of concern here. cd/ versus cd/root. 2 different directories, Terrible terminology, but this is the way it's going to be in Linux. Slash, that is your top level directory. It is the root directory. However, I mentioned earlier, slash root is a home directory for our super user named root. So two different directories. Slash root is under the root directory. So good luck at keeping all that straight. Number 9, typing the command pwd or echo $home will display the same output. Technically, that should say will always display the same output. Terminal back up here so that we can check on this. Answer to this is false. So pwd always going to show me the present working directory. It changes. But when I want to see home, an environment variable, that is not going to change. It doesn't matter what directory I'm in, that directory is not going to change. Something for you to remember as you are talking about variables. Remember, if I don't use the $ here when I'm echoing, it's just going to repeat whatever I'm typing. It's just going to parrot it. It's going to echo that. Also remember, everything in Linux is cap sensitive. So if I change my case on that, I'm going to have different results as well. Death Jar Jar in second place, quite a name there. Let's talk about piping commands. Which of the following is a proper example of piping commands? When we pipe a command, we are sending the output of one program to another program. And that is indeed done with the pipe symbol. We'll see an example of this in the next question. Number 11, it's domain 4. Domain 4 is all about finding useful commands, finding out what's going on behind the scene, your network settings, who's logged into the system, your system resources. So this one's just about a command that can separate a text file into columns. Why would you use this? Maybe somebody has sent you a CSV, a comma separated value file. I've gotten these many times in my life and would just maybe drop them into Excel and say, hey, I need to split this into columns so that I can work on them. But with Linux, they've given us a command built into our bash terminal called cut. Take an example here. I'm going to look at the etc passwd file. It's a text file separated by colons. So let's use our cut command. I can use cut-d, that's the delimiter. My delimiter for this is a colon. The field I want to review is just field 1, and the name of the file is passwd. So we use cut. One of the other commands that it talks about this is sort. So I'm going to use my pipe command, and I'm going to hit the sort. Sort's going to put this in alphabetical order for me. When I do it in reverse alphabetical order, I can do a -R on that. Maybe I would like to be able to scroll up and down on this. Well, guess what? I can use more than one pipe. Here, I'm going to pipe again to less. Now I can actually see that I'm indeed sorting this in reverse alphabetical order. I'm going to hit Q to quit, by the way. A couple of the other commands that it mentions are WC, word count. So if we look at our word count for this, for instance, it tells us there are I believe that's 51 lines, 88 words, and 2,950 characters. All of these are commands that you are going to find on the title page for the respective domain that you're working on. So make sure you look at all of these programs that they talk about on those title pages. Very, very valuable for you. Number 12. Which command is used to make a shell variable known to other executed programs? This comes out of domain 2. head over to our LPI guide. LPI guide, it's laid out so well for you to help pass the exam. However, to the best of my knowledge, I have never met anybody who can just pick up a book like this and read it and get much out of it. Look, oh, la, 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 read this and that. Like, that's going to get much for you. Not for me. That's not going to work. But I'll tell you what will work and what did work for me as I prepared to take the exam is I used the LPI guide to actually work all of the inline exercises that they provided. So every paragraph or so, they are giving you examples. They are showing you what they've done. Take these and actually work these in your own terminal. Some things that you are going to get out of this. One, you're going to get firsthand experience. You'll kind of get to see what things look like. You are going to get some muscle memory as a result from it. You are also going to get the learning experience that things quite often don't work in Linux on the first try. So you're going to type this in, and maybe it didn't work because you fat fingered it, or because your spacing's off, or your caps is off, or maybe you need to install a package, modify a configuration file, or you're using a different distribution of Linux. Maybe you've got a slightly different command. These are really all great ways to help us learn and retain the information we're going to need for the exam. And then lastly, I will tell you on my exam, I had a few questions come word for word from these examples. I had a couple more that were mishmash of various examples. So pretty great when you sit down and you take an exam and you're like, hey, I've already seen this question. I've already worked it. I know what the answer is. For this question, we learned that export is what we're going to use for this. So export is going to allow us to change this into more or less a global variable. All right, number 13. Oh, haven't had a multi-select in a while. Got 3 questions in particular in a row that are coming out of domain 5. I think there may be a couple more right after it, but I'm going to talk about these next 3 all at once. So I really will not give much information about it right away. Which of the following are stored in the etc passwd file? I will tell you on your exam, you are certain, almost certain, to have 1 or 2 questions related to what we're going over in these next few questions. So please pay attention. Let's go to the second one. Like I say, we will demonstrate these. Next one says, select all of the files involved in the Linux account configuration, and you are asked to choose 3. Told you make up of the exam. 30, choose individual. 7, choose all that apply. I'll tell you about the other 3 that are left over after this question. 3 files we're referencing are etc passwd, etc shadow, and etc group. And last of the 3, which file on a Linux system sets the maximum number of days before a password must be changed? So the other 3 questions on your exam, you will have to fill in a blank. That blank is going to consist of a word, a letter, or a symbol. So it might be what word is missing from this script, what parameter is missing from this tar command, which symbol represents blah, blah. So you do have to type something on 3 questions other than just fill in a dot. This can be kind of challenging for some people. Let's take a look at these 2 files in particular. We want to talk about etc passwd and etc shadow. Any user can view the contents of etc passwd. So I'm going to just hit the cat/etc passwd. We already looked at this file just briefly a moment ago. You are expected to know the makeup of this file. What's in here? I'm already going to tell you the password is in Etsy Shadow. It is not in Etsy Pass WD. That's weird. I mean, it's obviously the password file. It was. At one point, the file used to be kept in here, but it was determined to be insecure, so they offloaded it. They put in the Etsy Shadow. They still had a good configuration file, so they didn't want to abandon this. So we just made a modification. We replaced the password with a placeholder that's X. So the rest of it, username, X, and that is all it is. It's just an X. It's just a placeholder. It doesn't mean anything. Next up, we have the user ID. So here we have our WGU account, and the user ID is 1001. The default group is 1000. This is their home directory, /home/WGU. And then the default terminal, /bin/bash. What is not in there? Password, expiration day, locked, unlocked, groups. None of that is in there. Let's take a look at Etsy Shadow, and we're going to see right away, oh, no, I can't do that. That's right. You've got to have elevated permissions to view Etsy Shadow. What do we see here? Well, first off, we see a user account. We see a password in the chat bar. Oh, no. In the chat bar, tell me, who can decrypt the password? Do that. I'm going to pull this up in our LPI guide to show you the entire makeup of it. All right, the answer to that is no one. This is not meant to be decrypted. It is a one-way salted hashed password. So if you're the root user, it doesn't matter. You can't decrypt it. If you're the owner of the account, it doesn't matter. You're not going to decrypt it. If you don't know it, it will have to be reset. So here's the makeup of the entire Etsy Shadow. Username, password, last change, min, max, warning, and active, all that. Well, things that I think are important to point out. Here, we're telling you that these are dates. Well, these don't look like dates. What are they? They're called epoch dates. That's a machine date. We need to go to a website to actually convert it to something we can use. Some accounts, like Jimbo, has an exclamation point instead of a password. That means that no password has been set. And then lastly, if you see an account with 2 exclamation points, that means it's disabled. I believe that's all you should need to know about Etsy Pass WD and Etsy Shadow to answer those couple questions on your exam. All right, number 16, what command would you use to create a symbolic link on Linux? So we're still on domain 5. Domain 5, so much more in there than just chmod. Nothing too pressing, too difficult to learn, but you've got to go through it. You've got to make sure you go through the material. Check out every page of your study guide to make sure you're good with this. So a symbolic link, also called a soft link, is just a shortcut. It's just like having a shortcut on your desktop in Windows can point to a document. Guess what? If you delete the source, the shortcut will still be there. Same thing on this symbolic link. You run it and it just kind of goes, oh, I don't know what to do with you. And you create that with ln-s. If you're looking to create a hard link, you would just use ln. Question 17. It's another one of these questions. I can almost guarantee you're going to see something about this on your exam. Let's make sure you know all there is to know about it to get the correct answer. It says the sticky bit permission. This is also known as the restricted deletion flag. The sticky bit is designed to ensure nobody can delete a file from a shared directory unless they were the one who created it. So it's all about a shared directory. That means it can only be applied to a directory. It does not apply to a file. Well, how do you know that a sticky bit has been set? You have to look at the file permissions, right? Technically, you'd be looking at the directory permissions. What do permissions look like? Got an example. Starters, we're going to have the D for directory, and then you have your three groups of permissions. We'll say they're your user, group, and other. By the way, I always call it owner, group, and other, but we need to call it user now. You have those three groups, read, write, execute for each one. If the sticky bit is set, the one all the way to the right, the execute bit for the other group, it's not going to be a dash and it's not going to be an X. It's going to be a T. Here's your T. That means that the sticky bit is set for this directory. Well, how do you set the sticky bit? You're going to use your chmod command, just like you would to change permissions for any other. But instead of using your normal numbers, such as 755, you're going to prepend a 1 to it. Instead of chmod 755, which would have given read, write, execute, read blank, execute, read blank, execute, we're going to change it to 1755, and that's going to change the letter all the way on the right. There are two other special directory permissions that they mention. I'm not going to get into what they are, but I will at least point out how you can recognize them. The first one is called a set GID. That's the set group ID, user, group, and other. So if your set GID, set group ID is on, you're going to see an S in that section over here in the group section. And then lastly, you have the set UID, set user ID. If that is turned on, you are going to see an S in the user section. So that's everything you should need to know about the sticky bit. That was a lot. I've got some amazing points in that first place position. I mean, you are doing outstanding. How about a true or false question? Speed things up a little bit. Sudo and su are the same in Linux. What do you think? Wow, we have a really big turnout today. I didn't realize we were up over 39 people on that answer. The answer is false. Sudo is what we typically want to use. Sudo is going to give us momentary access to do what we need to do with elevated permissions. Earlier, I wanted to view the contents of the etc shadow file. I did sudo cat etc shadow. That said, hey, open it up long enough, plus some extra time. I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's a couple of minutes. And then it cuts those permissions out. If I use the su command, I am going to be logged in with those permissions until I log out. I love to take my coffee breaks. If I get up and go take a coffee break and I'm gone for 10 minutes, somebody walks in, here, this fool's logged in with super user access. I'm going to change some passwords, delete files. Not a good idea. So we generally want to use sudo. Another true or false. Deleting a user will automatically delete their files. I'm going to demonstrate this. And in order to do so, first I want to take another look at our etc passwd file. Here's Jimbo. There's our Jimbo user. I have a couple of files here on my computer, and you can see I'm so clever in my naming. Here I've named a file 1, and here I've named another one 123.x. But the file named 1 is owned by Jimbo. So what happens if I sudo del user Jimbo? Jimbo's now gone. I do an ls-l again. I look at it. I can see that the file is still there. I can see that my permissions are the same that they were before. The only thing that's different is that it no longer shows Jimbo. It now shows 1002. What is 1002? Look at our etc passwd file. That is the user ID for what is now the former user named Jimbo. So it didn't delete it. It didn't change file permissions. It did not change ownership. It just said, hey, Jimbo's gone. I don't know who this user is anymore, but somebody used to own it, and this was their user ID. Domain 4 question, we almost always see many more people get this wrong than right. So it's a real streak buster. Let's see what we get. It says this command will display the IP address of a specified domain. Ooh, look at there. We must have some repeat people in here today, or y'all are just super duper smart, and that's great too. So let's look at IF. Well, we'll start with what it said. The answer is host. So if I do host www.wgu.edu, this is the one that they teach us in the book. It's going to give us all of our IP addresses associated with it. Now, what is ifconfig? That is one that people answered. Quite often they choose that answer. ifconfig gives me information about my system, about my network card. Here's my network card, and I'm gonna get my IP addresses. I'm gonna get some packet information. Here's my loopback card, but it's all about me. It's also a dated command. It's kind of been replaced with that IP command, IP space link in particular. People say, well, how is host different from NS lookup? Well, let's take a look. We do NS lookup. You can see we are going to get different information. We're going to get all of the DNS information. It's not the IP information. So a little bit different. Host is the command that you need to know. Type, right? Hope you're all taking notes and making notes of things that you're having questions with. So use this command to remove a directory, XYZ, and all files within it. The answer to this is indeed RM-R. That's going to be your recursive. That is going to actually, that's your nuclear, your flush option. It's going to look at XYZ and it's just going to say, get rid of it. When we use the RMDIR command, that's only going to work if you have pruned all of the files out of it first. So you've had to use your RM command and delete commands out individually, or maybe more than one at a time. But you can't get rid of a directory using RMDIR if there are still files in it. But you can use RM-R to do it all at once. Number 22, which program generated the following output? I put this on here because your exam quite likely to have 2 or 3 questions in which you have a picture, a graphic displayed. And the question is going to say, what program generated this output? Or what program is running? How do you get the experience from that? You actually run these things on your own. You try them, you take a look, you open up your terminal and you type free. Oh, that's what that looks like. Here's top, we saw it earlier. How about your D message? All of those commands that you see on your title page for the domains, who, W, ID, quite likely that you're going to see these commands show up. And maybe they're going to ask you how they're used, but it might also be what's the output to expect from them. Number 23, multi-select question. Which command allows a file xyz.sh to execute? Select 2. I think this is my favorite question that I've created on this particular session because it lights up the chat bar quite often. People go, "Oh, that was wrong. You tricked me. You shouldn't have done that." And we'll see who else agrees with that when we see how many people chose that red command. Yep. Yep. It doesn't say Chmod 777. There's no such thing as Chone 77. Yeah, I see in the chat bar somebody saying you tricked me. Yeah, our eyes can immediately go to those things. That's why it's so important to actually review what you're looking at. Make absolutely sure that you're reading the correct information. It's not uh, it's not unreasonable to think that there could be a little bit of trickery or a little bit of deception on the exam to do things like this. I saw 777 and immediately thought, oh, that's it. So yeah, Chmod plus X, right? Chmod 755. By the way, everybody knows Chmod, the numbers 755, 745. Make sure you know how to do it with the letters also. What if the question's a fill in the blank and they want you to use the letters to give I don't know, to take away write access from the group section? You would need to know how to do that. New second place person here, Death Jar Jar. Love the name. All right, what are the differences between a private web browser window and a regular web browser window? This comes out of domain 1, and we're asking you to choose 3. Your exam is not going to be 100% Linux. There are going to be a couple of questions maybe about networking or about hardware or general security. Kind of nice to get some things that you might have a little bit more experience with. First thing is that private web browser windows do not keep records in the browser history. So the holiday season will be coming up. You need to be doing some holiday shopping for your spouse. Use your incognito or your in private browser. Your snooping spouse won't know where you've been. Private web browser windows do not send regular stored cookies, so they can't see where you've been. Other websites aren't going to be able to see that. And then also, they are not going to store cookies persistently. So if you're going to websites and they're constantly, news websites love to do this. Oh, you have to accept all cookies to continue. Well, you don't want all those cookies on your machine, maybe. So use your incognito window, say sure, and as soon as you close it, they're gone. 25. How about another browser question? Why are web browser cookies considered dangerous? I always like to say, because there might be raisin cookies and nobody wants a raisin cookie. But the correct answer is that cookies support identification and tracking of users. We don't necessarily want people to know other websites to know where we've been. We've been shopping for a car on a competitor's website. How about this one? Use the following to install Tree on a Ubuntu system. There are 3.5 package managers that are talked about in the LPI guide. I think it's important to know how to install a package with any one of them. Answer to this one is sudo apt-get install tree. That's for Ubuntu. If you were using Red Hat, you would use RPM. If you were using Debian, they talk about using Yum. What else? So an actual newer versions of Ubuntu would actually be just sudo apt-get. To do this apt-get tree, I don't believe you have to use install. However, the answer that's covered in your exam is apt-get install tree, so that's the one we go with. Here's a DNS question. This type of DNS record is the opposite of an A record. I'll pull this up in our LPI guide as an opportunity to show you. Every chapter has two sets of exercises. One's called your guided exercises, one's called your explorational exercises. Make sure you review these. They're good questions to kind of validate your knowledge. And once again, my own personal experience, I had a couple of questions on my exam that came directly from these word for word. So make sure you're familiar with them and that you know the answers. 28. Use this wildcard to replace a single character, ls, for example, ls something inux. So when we use this wildcard, we would see every file that was called Linux, Minix, Zinix, but only one letter can be replaced. The same answer in Windows, and it's going to be your question mark. Question mark means one character exactly. If I used my star would actually show any file name just INUX with nothing before it. But it would also show Linux. It would show AAAA Linux. It would show anything that had anything before the INUX. So it's good to know the difference between using the star and a question mark. All right, 2 questions left. A side question or 2 to go along with it. How about this one? Multiple users can have the same default group ID. What do you think? Absolutely, the answer is true. In the chat bar, tell me, can multiple users that have the same user ID? I think no. Everybody has to have their own unique user ID. All right, last question. Use the following command to rename a file in Linux. We rename a file with the mv command. That means move, right? Well, right, it is. Now, some people have asked me, well, can I also use CP? I can copy it to a new name. And yes, you can, but there's a difference. Rename means you're renaming it. If you're copying to another name, you have a duplicate. So you didn't rename it, you copied it to a new name. All right, that's the end of our game. Let's find out how everybody did. All right, Death Jar Jar, Glenn, and in first place, by a landslide, Josh M. Outstanding, everybody. Thanks so much.